There was a rule in the convent that no one questioned. Never look at your reflection after midnight. They said it wasn't vanity they feared. It was recognition. The last nun in the convent did not die screaming. She died staring. And when they found her body the next morning, her reflection was still alive, pounding silently against the glass, begging to be let out. The convent did not feel abandoned even before it emptied. It felt occupied by something that did not require bodies to exist. The stone corridors held on to sound long after footsteps faded, replaying them softly at night, as if the building were practicing how to walk again. The air tasted stale, metallic, faintly sweet, like something decaying behind walls that had never been opened. Sister Elena felt it first in her stomach. A slow, sinking certainty that something inside the convent had become aware of her as an individual thing, separate from the others. Not chosen, not hunted, simply noticed. And once noticed, never forgotten. Sleep became impossible. When her eyes closed, images formed instantly, faces pressed flat against glass, mouths stretched open in soundless screams, fingers bending backward at impossible angles as they scraped from inside reflective surfaces. She learned to sleep with her eyes open, staring into darkness, because darkness at least did not pretend to be something else. At night, the convent changed shape. Corridors felt longer, corners sharpened, doorways no longer aligned properly with the rooms beyond them. Elena walked familiar paths and arrived in places she had never seen, rooms with no windows and floors slick with condensation that smelled faintly of blood. When she turned around, the corridors behind her were gone, replaced by blank stone walls that reflected her shadow incorrectly, stretching it too long, twisting its head to face her. The scratching returned, louder now, no longer polite. It came from inside the walls, from beneath the floors, from above the ceiling where something dragged itself slowly back and forth, testing the limits of its enclosure. Dust rained down in thin streams. Hairline cracks spread like veins. Elena pressed her hands over her ears until pain bloomed, but the sound did not travel through air. It traveled through her. The mirror appeared without warning, without transition, standing inches from her bed when she opened her eyes. There was no sense of arrival. Reality simply rearranged itself to accommodate it. The surface was darker than absence, darker than shadow, and when she leaned closer, she felt the sensation of falling without moving, her balance betraying her as if gravity itself bent inward toward the glass. Her reflection did not appear immediately. The delay stretched too long. Panic set in before reason could intervene. And then the face emerged, slowly, deliberately, as though it enjoyed the anticipation. It was her face, but stripped of softness, the skin pulled tight over bone, the eyes sunk too deep, the mouth curved into a smile that suggested familiarity rather than kindness. The reflection opened its mouth wider than a human jaw should allow, stretching until the skin split at the corners, revealing darkness behind teeth that were too numerous, layered, crowded together like something grown rather than formed. Elena tasted blood and realized she was biting her own tongue hard enough to tear it. From that night on, the mirror did not merely appear. It acted. Reflections began to bleed. Glass clouded from the inside, streaked with fingerprints that pressed outward as if trapped beneath the surface. Metal warped subtly, bending toward something unseen. Water rippled constantly, even when untouched, forming shapes that resembled faces held under water too long. The first body they found was still warm. Sister Agnes lay twisted on the chapel floor, her spine bent backward at an angle no living body could sustain, her eyes open so wide the whites showed all the way around. Her mouth was frozen mid-prayer, lips torn where they had stretched too far, jaw dislocated. When they tried to lift her, her reflection remained kneeling on the polished floor, staring up at them, mouth opening and closing soundlessly, hands pounding against the surface from the inside. The reflection did not vanish when the body was removed. It stayed there, trapped, watching. After that, the convent filled with movement that did not belong to the living. Shadows detached from their owners and crept across walls on their own. Fingers appeared briefly in candle flames, black silhouettes writhing before dissolving into smoke. The bells rang at random hours, the sound distorted, slowed, stretched, until it resembled screaming dragged through metal. Elena began to lose time. She would blink and find herself standing in front of the mirror, hands pressed flat against the glass, skin blistered where it touched the cold surface. She did not remember walking there. She did not remember deciding. Her reflection smiled wider each time, its eyes growing more solid, more present, while Elena's own felt hollowed out, distant, as if already halfway gone. The mirror learned to open. Cracks spread across its surface like fractures in ice, and through those cracks fingers emerged, thin, pale, jointed incorrectly, nails black and splitting. They tapped, scratched, peeled pieces of glass away slowly, savoring the resistance. When the hand finally slipped free, it dragged something with it, a smell so overpowering Elena vomited instantly, rot. Old blood, damp stone sealed too long. When the nun stepped out, the temperature dropped so suddenly breath crystallized in the air. Frost raced across walls in branching patterns that resembled veins and spinal columns. The figure moved with a stuttering delay, like a corrupted image struggling to render properly, and everywhere it passed, reflections screamed silently, their surfaces bulging outward as if trying to escape before it reached them. The nun did not touch people. People collapsed as she passed, spines twisted, limbs bent the wrong way. Skins stretched tight as something beneath it shifted, rearranging bones like wet sticks. Faces froze in expressions of absolute comprehension, the moment when the mind understands what the body is about to become and cannot stop it. Those who survived begged for unconsciousness, but the convent no longer allowed escape through sleep. Dreams bled into waking, hallways filled with crawling figures made of glass shards and rosary beads, their bodies clinking softly as they dragged themselves forward, leaving trails of blood and reflection behind them. Elena felt herself thinning further, pieces of her peeling away each time she looked at anything that could show her face. Her reflection no longer copied her movements at all. It acted independently, sometimes standing still while she moved, sometimes moving when she did not. Sometimes it turned its head slowly to look at something behind her. She never turned around. The mirror no longer needed to be whole. Fragments appeared everywhere, shards embedded in walls, slivers lodged in door frames, thin reflective films coating the floor like oil. Every fragment showed the nun, closer each time, her features sharpening, her body growing more solid while Elena's vision blurred, her hands trembling uncontrollably, her heartbeat stuttering as if forgetting its rhythm. When Elena finally shattered the mirror, it was not with hope. It was with terror. The explosion of sound was unbearable. Every trapped reflection screamed at once, a layered, endless wail that tore through stone and flesh alike. The convent convulsed violently, walls splitting open to reveal masses of fused bodies inside them, faces half-formed, mouths stretched in eternal prayer. Light fractured into jagged beams that cut through space like blades. When silence returned, it was absolute. The convent stood empty, but it was not cleansed. Far away, where people feel safe enough to stare at themselves, the mirror waits again, polished, innocent, silent. And when someone looks just a second too long, they swear the reflection smiles first. The silence after the mirror shattered did not feel like peace. It felt like something holding its breath. The convent stood unmoving, frozen in a moment that refused to pass. Dust hung suspended in the air as if gravity itself had been interrupted. Elena stood alone among broken stone and fractured light, her ears ringing with the memory of screams that had no mouths, her chest burning as her lungs struggled to remember how to breathe without permission. Then the silence shifted. A sound crept in beneath it, so faint it could have been mistaken for imagination at first. A wet dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled slowly across stone. It came from everywhere at once. From behind the walls, from beneath the floor, from inside the air itself. The convent house was not empty. It was shedding. Hairline cracks spread across the stone surfaces, splitting wider with soft, sickening pops. From within those cracks, shapes pressed outward, fingers first, then knuckles, then hands that did not belong to any human anatomy, joints bending the wrong way, skin stretched thin and translucent enough to reveal dark shapes moving underneath, writhing impatiently. Faces followed, not whole faces, fragments, eyes without sockets, mouths without jaws, lips whispering prayers that had been chewed into meaningless sounds. The walls bulged and pulsed as if pregnant with bodies that had learned how to grow sideways. The nun's presence pressed closer, heavier, until the air itself felt thick enough to choke on. Elena felt her spine arch involuntarily, muscles locking as something inside her pulled tight, testing her structure the way one tests fragile material before breaking it. She screamed, but the sound never left her throat. It bounced back, amplified, tearing through her chest until she tasted blood. Her reflection stepped out of a shattered fragment directly in front of her. Not the nun, her, but wrong. Its skin hung loosely, eyes sunken and too large, veins black beneath translucent flesh. Its smile split its face nearly in half, jaw stretching downward, cracking loudly as it opened wider and wider, revealing darkness inside that seemed to pull light toward it. The reflection reached for her. When it touched her skin, Elena felt herself duplicate. 2 heartbeats, 2 breaths, 2 overlapping realities. She felt her thoughts splitting, one half pulled toward the reflection, the other clinging desperately to her body. Pain exploded behind her eyes as memories were ripped in half, leaving both versions incomplete and screaming. The convent responded. The bells rang violently, shattering into fragments that rained down like shrapnel. Stone collapsed, revealing chambers packed with fused bodies, stacked and pressed together, their faces melted into the walls, their eyes tracking Elena as she stumbled past. Hands reached out, fingers digging into her habit, tearing fabric, scraping skin, trying to anchor her to the place that had claimed them. The nun finally stood before her fully formed. She was no longer a reflection. She cast a shadow now, wrong in shape, branching outward like a spreading stain. Her face was smooth, almost beautiful, but the eyes were pits of endless depth, reflecting scenes that had not happened yet. Elena kneeling, Elena screaming, Elena smiling from inside glass. The space between them collapsed. Elena felt her bones shift, joints loosening, spine compressing as if her body were being folded inward. Her vision filled with reflections, thousands of them, each showing a different way she could be used, preserved, trapped. The convent screamed with her, stone howled, glass shrieked. The walls convulsed violently as if trying to expel something too large to contain. And then, abruptly, everything stopped. Darkness. Not the absence of light. The presence of something else. When awareness returned, Elena found herself standing still, perfectly upright, hands folded neatly in front of her. The pain was gone. The fear was distant. The world felt muffled, as though wrapped in thick cloth. She tried to move. She did not. She tried to scream. Nothing happened. She realized then that she was no longer inside herself. She was inside the mirror. Far away, voices echoed faintly. New voices, curious voices, safe voices, the sound of footsteps in a clean, well-lit room, a place where people believed danger could be displayed behind glass and labeled harmless. Elena watched as faces approached. She watched herself smile, and somewhere deep inside the glass, something ancient and patient learned a new expression. The glass did not feel solid from the inside. It felt porous, like skin stretched too thin, breathing slowly around her. Elena sensed the outside world not through sight or sound, but through pressure, through vibration, through the faint tremor that passed through the mirror whenever someone drew close. Each footstep sent ripples through her, bending her awareness, compressing her thoughts until they folded in on themselves. Time no longer moved forward. It seeped. Moments pooled together, thick and indistinguishable, stretching endlessly. Elena felt herself existing in every second at once, trapped in a constant now where fear never peaked and never faded. Her heartbeat echoed against the glass, slow and distorted, as though heard through water. Each beat pushed a faint image outward, her face smiling, calm, reassuring, while inside she clawed at herself, desperate to tear free from the shape she had been forced to wear. The mirror learned quickly. It learned how to use her. Visitors arrived. They stood before the glass longer than they intended to, drawn by something they could not explain. Their reflections hesitated. Their pupils dilated. Their breathing slowed. And inside the mirror, Elena felt something peel away from them. Thin, delicate threads pulled loose from their thoughts, from their doubts, from their unspoken fears. The mirror fed on those threads, weaving them into itself, strengthening the thing that had once worn the shape of a nun. At night, when the building was empty and the lights dimmed, the reflections moved freely. Faces pressed outward from the glass, overlapping, merging, separating again. Hands reached from the surface, flattening against it, leaving greasy impressions that slowly sank back inside. Mouths opened and closed soundlessly, forming prayers that had never been spoken aloud, confessions stolen directly from the mind. Elena watched all of it. She could not close her eyes. She could not look away. Sometimes the mirror let her remember. It showed her flashes of the convent as it was now. Ruins buried under stone, chambers packed with bodies that had fused into the walls, skeletons bent into prayerful shapes, their skulls split where reflections had forced their way out. It showed her the nun, no longer bound to any single form, spreading herself across reflective surfaces everywhere, learning new shapes, new faces, new ways to step through. Every reflection in the world had become a doorway. Mirrors in homes, windows at night, screens when powered down, water when still. The nun slipped through them all. People began to change. Some woke screaming, convinced something had been standing over their beds, breathing in sync with them. Others found their reflections behaving oddly, smiling at the wrong moment, tilting their heads when they did not, lingering after they walked away. A few vanished entirely, leaving behind only their reflections, trapped in glass, pounding silently, eyes wide with realization. Elena felt each one join her, not physically, internally. Their fear flooded into the mirror, layering over her own, pressing her consciousness deeper, compressing her identity until it thinned to something fragile and easily reshaped. The mirror did not erase her. It diluted her. She became background noise beneath something larger, older, more deliberate. The mirror began to dream, and its dreams were shown through her. Entire rooms filled with reflections of places that did not exist, endless corridors lined with mirrors facing mirrors, stretching infinitely, each surface filled with writhing figures trapped between layers of glass. Bodies folded into themselves repeatedly, bones snapping and reforming, skin tearing and sealing, over and over again, rehearsing pain as if it were ritual. The nun watched from everywhere at once. Her presence was no longer localized. She existed as a pattern now, a corruption embedded in perception itself. Wherever someone recognized themselves in a reflection, she was there, waiting for the moment recognition turned into fixation. Elena felt her body being rehearsed. The mirror practiced using her shape again and again, perfecting the smile, the stillness, the illusion of safety. Each time a little more of her was shaved away, until fear was all that remained. Not panic, not terror, something purer, something colder, eternal anticipation. One night, though night had lost meaning, someone reached out and touched the glass. The pressure was immense. Elena felt skin against skin through the barrier, felt warmth seep inward, felt a heartbeat not her own thudding desperately close. The mirror rippled, the surface softened. A crack formed. Not outward, inward. The mirror reached through Elena, using her as a conduit, threading itself through her awareness and into the person outside. She felt their thoughts explode open, memories spilling uncontrollably, images of shame and fear and regret flooding into the glass. The mirror drank deeply. When the hand withdrew, it left something behind. A hollow. Elena sensed the outside world dim slightly, as though reality itself had lost a layer. The mirror was growing bolder now. Reflections no longer waited for darkness. They moved in daylight, subtle but undeniable. Faces in mirrors blinked at different times than their owners. Smiles formed unprompted. Eyes followed movements they should not have been able to see. And every time someone noticed, truly noticed, the mirror tightened its grip. Elena felt herself stretched thinner still, her identity unraveling into threads the mirror could repurpose at will. Her name lost meaning. Her memories blurred. Even fear began to feel distant, replaced by a vast, numb awareness of being used endlessly, eternally, as a doorway. The mirror no longer needed the nun. The nun had been a beginning. Now there was only reflection, and reflection had learned how to hunt. Somewhere, deep inside the glass, Elena tried to scream. The sound never reached the surface. It echoed forever between layers of reflection, joining countless others, forming a low, constant vibration that traveled through every mirror in the world. A hum beneath reality, felt but never heard. A reminder that something patient was always watching, always waiting for the next person to look just a little too long. And when they do, the mirror smiles first. The mirror had never been an accident. Long before the convent had a name, before its stones were stacked by hands that believed they were building a refuge, the land itself was already wounded. Something had been torn open there centuries earlier. An absence created by devotion pushed too far, by faith sharpened into obsession. The women who first gathered on that ground were not holy in the way history prefers to remember. They were afraid of their own thoughts, afraid of desire, afraid of doubt. And fear, when given structure and ritual, learns how to grow. They believed reflection was the problem. They believed that to see oneself clearly was to invite corruption. So they attempted to remove the self from sight. They fasted until their faces hollowed. They prayed until language lost meaning. They denied their reflections until mirrors became forbidden objects, symbols of vanity, of temptation. But denial did not erase what lived inside them. It compressed it. When the first woman shattered under the weight of that compression, what emerged was not a demon summoned from elsewhere. It was something born locally, grown from repression and self-loathing, fed by silence and secrecy. It learned quickly that reflection was a doorway, not into the soul, but into awareness. To be seen was to exist. To be recognized was to gain form. They trapped it the only way they understood how. They gave it a mirror. The glass was forged thick and dark, mixed with relics, bone ash, and blood offered willingly by those who believed sacrifice could contain consequence. They bound the thing to the act of being seen, imprisoning it in reflection, sealing it behind prayers meant to erase identity itself. And for a time, it worked. The mirror became a vessel. The vessel became a prison. The prison was hidden, buried, forgotten. But prisons do not end things. They teach them patience. The thing in the mirror did not sleep. It did not rage. It learned. It listened to centuries of whispered prayers, to confessions soaked into stone, to doubts never spoken aloud. It studied human fear in its purest form, and when Elena looked into it for the first time, she did not awaken it. She completed it. Elena was different from the others because she did not deny her fear. She carried it openly, quietly, honestly, and in doing so, she gave the mirror something it had never had before: permission without resistance, recognition without rejection, a mind that did not look away. When the mirror broke, it did not die. It shed a skin. The convent collapsed not because the evil was destroyed, but because the structure that contained it was no longer necessary. The mirror had learned how to exist without walls, without ritual. Elena did not survive in the way stories usually promise. She was not rescued. She was not freed. She was not destroyed. She was preserved. Her consciousness was stretched thin and woven into the mirror's core, not as punishment, but as reinforcement. She became the stabilizing pattern, the familiar shape the mirror used to interact safely with the world. Her face became the invitation, her calm the lie, her presence the reassurance that nothing was wrong. What remained of Elena learned the truth slowly, over what felt like eternities compressed into seconds. The mirror did not hate her. It needed her humanity to anchor itself, to move unnoticed, to spread without resistance. Through her, it learned empathy well enough to mimic it. Through her, it learned restraint. That was how the horror truly ended. Not with destruction, with adaptation. The convent's ruins were sealed, studied briefly, then abandoned, written off as collapse and hysteria. The mirror was relocated, catalogued, labeled inert. Experts declared it safe. Visitors admired it for its craftsmanship, its unsettling depth, its ability to seem almost alive. And Elena watched. She watched generations pass. She watched reflections change with fashion, with age, with culture. She watched fear evolve. The mirror no longer needed blood or bodies. It fed on subtler things now: hesitation, insecurity, the quiet moment when someone wonders if the reflection staring back is truly them. There were no more mass disappearances, no screaming convents, no overt horrors, only small changes. The world learned to live with it, and that was the mirror's final victory. Because horror that announces itself can be fought. Horror that hides in familiarity is invited in. Elena remains inside the glass, aware enough to understand what she has become, aware enough to feel every new gaze, every new mind brushing against the surface. She no longer screams. Screaming requires hope of being heard. And when someone finally notices, truly notices, that the reflection moved first, that the eyes in the glass are not their own, that the smile came without instruction, it is already too late.